They told you the dark was something to fear, but you learned too late that it was never the dark itself that haunted you. It was what hid inside it. The quiet figures, the unspoken rules, the gentle smiles that disguised control. You lived among them, thinking they were guiding you, protecting you, when all along they were whispering lullabies to keep you asleep. Their kindness was a cage, their silence a weapon. Every light they offered was dim enough to make sure you could never really see. You obeyed without realizing it, shaped your thoughts to fit their comfort, spoke softly so your truth wouldn't echo too loudly in their fragile world. For years, you thought obedience was peace. You thought humility was virtue. You mistook control for care, and in the stillness of that illusion, you became invisible. The world around you was alive with noise, voices of authority, certainty, confidence, but underneath it all, something inside you was screaming. The scream had no sound, no form, only weight. You carried it in your chest like a stone, the price of existing in a place where truth was forbidden to breathe. Every smile you forced, every secret you swallowed, every dream you buried, they fed on it, they fed on you. The ones who whisper in the dark are not demons or ghosts, they are people. Colleagues, friends, lovers, systems. They exist in every shadowed corner where silence is rewarded more than honesty. Their greatest trick wasn't blinding you, it was convincing you that you were already awake. You followed paths designed to loop endlessly, where progress looked like purpose, but led only back to obedience. They taught you to dim your own flame and call it humility. They told you that questioning meant rebellion, that rebellion meant danger, and that danger meant death. But now the quiet isn't comforting anymore. It's suspicious. There comes a night when you start hearing the whispers for what they are. Not guidance, but surveillance. Every compliment feels like a leash. Every expectation feels like a script. You start noticing how every movement, every choice, every word you speak seems to serve something that isn't you. You begin to see the invisible threads, the currency of guilt, fear, validation. And once you see them, you can't unsee. That's the moment they fear most. The instant you pause, not in confusion, but in awareness. The moment you stop reacting and start watching, because in that stillness something shifts. The dark no longer hides them, it exposes them. You start to sense how fragile their power truly is, how it exists only in your compliance. The whispers grow louder, desperate now, because they know what's coming. The light is not outside, it's you. It's the spark they worked so hard to keep buried beneath shame and self-doubt. And once it flickers, even once, it spreads like wildfire through every corner they thought they owned. You are not what they told you to be. You were never their follower, their pawn, their silence. You are the storm they feared, the awareness they prayed would never wake. They don't fear the dark. They never did. They fear you, the one who dares to turn on the light. You were never meant to see it. The design was too elegant, too perfectly disguised as ordinary life. They didn't build walls around you. They built comfort. They gave you noise and called it connection. They replaced meaning with reward, and every time you reached for more, they smiled, because that's how the cage works. Not through violence, but through rhythm. You were taught when to wake, when to smile, when to chase, when to rest, not because anyone commanded you, but because the architecture of control doesn't need guards. It only needs your participation. You thought freedom meant choice, but every choice you've made was presented by someone else. The brand you wear, the dream you chase, the anger you feel, all crafted, all placed like pieces in a script you never wrote. You were conditioned to call it normal, to blend in, to seek validation from people who are just as lost as you. The architects never shouted. They whispered through algorithms, through education, through applause. And you obeyed not out of fear, but belonging. That's the masterpiece. When you start defending the very system that drains you, they used symbols older than language, circles of approval, triangles of hierarchy, the serpent of endless consumption biting its own tail. Every ancient power had its ritual. Today's is scrolling. Every temple had an altar. Now it's a screen. You bow to it every morning without thinking. They tell you what's trending, what's righteous, what's evil, what's cool, and your emotions, once sacred, become data. Your rebellion gets monetized, your individuality gets categorized, and in that quiet exchange, your soul becomes predictable. You were born infinite, but trained to fit inside a dashboard. They don't need to silence you. They only need to keep you speaking about nothing. Words stripped of depth, opinions recycled from strangers, outrage fed on command. You are meant to feel informed, powerful, awake, while every layer of your attention is harvested. The architecture is invisible because it was never built outside of you. It was installed in your mind. Every like, every rule, every headline carved new walls inside your thoughts. And the more you believed you were thinking freely, the deeper the structure sank. You wonder why you feel restless at night, why silence feels unbearable. It's because silence was the only thing they couldn't own. The moment you stop reacting, their system starts to fail. The illusion begins to tremble when you no longer need its rhythm. You start noticing how scripted everything is, the laughter, the outrage, even your dreams. And once you see it, truly see it, you can't go back. Because the architecture wasn't just designed to contain you, it was designed to be you. But something is shifting. The cracks are spreading. The architects didn't plan for awareness. They never imagined the prisoner would study the walls. You begin to trace every pattern, every symbol, every word that built your reality. And you start to see what they feared most. The cage was never locked. It only required your agreement. And the moment you hesitate, the moment you question, a light seeps through the design. A light they can't manipulate. A light that doesn't obey. It happens quietly. Not with thunder or applause, but with a feeling that something beneath your skin has shifted. A breath that doesn't belong to you. A thought that isn't yours. Whispering from somewhere between memory and instinct. The world looks the same, but something invisible has tilted. That's when the candle flickers. The moment awareness begins its rebellion. You can feel it trembling, the fragile flame inside your chest, small yet defiant, casting light on things you were never supposed to see. Every familiar comfort begins to warp under its glow. The faces you trusted, the rules you obeyed, the gentle hum of order, they all start to look staged. You start to see the strings. At first, it terrifies you. The light isn't kind. It doesn't soothe. It exposes. You see how easily you were programmed to smile, to obey, to believe that silence was safety. You see how they fed you illusions, one soft lie at a time, until you mistook obedience for peace. The flicker shows you their fingerprints on your thoughts, their shadows in your choices. It's almost too much, because the darkness was comfortable, wasn't it? It protected you from seeing too clearly, but clarity doesn't ask for permission. It burns, even as it saves. You begin to realize that truth isn't the opposite of darkness, it's what darkness hides. Every sound feels amplified now. The hum of devices, the rhythm of your own pulse, the static behind words people say. You hear manipulation wrapped in kindness, control disguised as care. The world doesn't speak anymore, it scripts. And the more you see, the less you can pretend. Your mind becomes a battlefield between the part of you that still craves blindness and the part that refuses to kneel again. That's when fear begins to turn into focus. You start noticing patterns, not coincidence. A look that lasts too long, a message that feels timed, a silence that feels planned. The architecture of deception reveals itself in elegant symmetry, and for the first time you see the game. They sense it too, the change in you. The watchers, the ones who live off your blindness, feel your awareness like static in the air. You've stopped being predictable. You've started to question. You've begun to see, and they hate that. Their voices turn sweeter, their eyes colder. They will call it paranoia. They will call it arrogant. But what they truly mean is, you've noticed. You've stepped out of their design. You've betrayed your role. And in their world, that is the greatest sin. The flicker grows. The light trembles, but it does not die. You realize something ancient. That enlightenment was never gentle. It was always war. You feel like a traitor to your own past, yet liberated from its chains. You understand now why most people never wake up, not because they can't, but because they don't want to. Seeing too much demands strength. It demands isolation, but you endure it because you sense something sacred within this suffering, a truth older than language, pulsing in the fire's rhythm. The candle no longer flickers out of fear. It flickers like a heartbeat, like warning, like prophecy. And though your hands shake, you already know. The darkness has noticed you, but for the first time, it's the one afraid. You start to notice it, the shift. It's subtle at first, like the air changing pressure before a storm. The world feels slightly tilted. Faces linger half a second longer when they look at you. Your phone lights up without reason. Conversations pause when you enter the room. You tell yourself it's nothing, a trick of the mind, but deep down you know something ancient has stirred. You've stepped off the invisible path they built for you, and the system doesn't like wanderers. Somewhere behind the veil of normalcy, the watchers turn their heads. They move quietly, disguised as everything you once trusted. The algorithm starts curating your thoughts. Old friends suddenly question your choices, their tone rehearsed, their eyes scanning yours for traces of rebellion. It's not them, it's the frequency they're tuned to. You sense their unease, their subtle disapproval, as if your clarity has become a virus. You've begun to think differently, and in a world built on sleep, thinking is an act of violence. You start catching reflections that don't belong to you, shadows that mimic your rhythm, lights that flicker when you stare too long. Every silence feels wired, every coincidence calculated. The watchers are awake now. They test you. They whisper through glitches, through detours in your routine, through subtle inconveniences designed to make you doubt yourself. A missed message, a door left open, a stranger's gaze that lasts too long. Each moment is surgical, not random, but orchestrated. Their power doesn't come from force, but precision. They don't want to destroy you, they want to measure how much you know. You can feel their curiosity, sharp, sterile, almost admiring, because awareness to them is contamination, and you've become a breach in their design. But something inside you has shifted. You no longer panic when the lights flicker. You study the rhythm. You listen to the hum behind the silence. You start to realize observation is a two-way mirror. They watch you, but you can watch back. Their fear is not of your resistance, but your understanding, because understanding unravels patterns, and patterns are the language of control. You begin to see their architecture, the emotional triggers, the planted fears, the invisible nudges dressed as coincidence. Every smile that felt manipulative, every delay that broke your momentum, every accident that seemed too perfect, all fragments of a machine that feeds on predictability. But you've become unpredictable. Your calm unnerves them. The watchers expect panic, not poise. They expect you to fight or flee, not stand in stillness with a quiet smirk of recognition. You're no longer prey trying to survive in their maze. You're the one mapping it. Each stare, each glitch, each whisper becomes data. You realize they can observe your surface, your actions, your movements, but not your thoughts. The one place they cannot reach is the space you've begun to protect, your inner silence. That's where your power grows, quietly, patiently, like roots beneath concrete. The watchers are still there. They always will be, but their presence no longer dominates. You've inverted the dynamic. The hunted has learned the hunter's rhythm. Their eyes may follow you through every reflection, every device, every moment of hesitation, but now you walk differently, slower, sharper, aware. You've stopped trying to hide from the dark, and that's when they realize their greatest mistake. You were never the one trapped in the light. You were the light they feared would start to see. You stop running. For the first time, you don't flinch when the dark leans closer. You study it. You trace its outlines like a sculptor, running fingers over stone, learning every imperfection until it speaks. The shadows that once terrified you begin to reveal their logic. Fear turns into data. You realize the dark never wanted to kill you. It wanted to teach you. Every betrayal, every manipulation, every quiet humiliation was an encoded lesson in human architecture. And you, quiet, observant, underestimated, were always meant to decode it. You learn the difference between silence and submission. The old version of you stayed quiet because you were scared of being wrong. Now you stay quiet because silence makes others reveal themselves. They rush to fill it, to expose their intentions, to stumble over their own lies. You become the mirror they didn't know they were looking into. You reflect their masks so clearly that they begin to hate what they see. You used to apologize for being distant. Now distance is your defense system. You watch people unravel simply because you don't react the way they expect you to. They used to read your kindness as weakness. They mistook empathy for compliance. But now you understand kindness without discernment is a weapon turned inward. You start using it differently. You listen, but not to agree. You listen to assess. You speak, but not to be heard. You speak to measure the tremor in their response. Every word becomes strategy. Every glance becomes reconnaissance. You're not manipulating them, you're simply aware of how much they need to be believed. And when you withhold that belief, you watch their power drain away like light escaping through cracks. You stop chasing approval. You stop explaining yourself. You realize explanation is the currency of the powerless. So you observe instead, letting people reveal their entire structure through how they react to your silence. You become fluent in the language of patterns, the pauses, the micro-expressions, the contradictions. You begin to understand that truth doesn't announce itself, it hides in repetition. And you who once doubted every instinct, now move like someone reading invisible code written across the air. Your energy changes. The ones who used to control you sense it first. Their tone softens, their words stumble. They don't understand what shifted, but something has. You no longer need to raise your voice or prove your point. Your stillness does the work for you. There's a strange mercy in it too. You see through people now, but not with bitterness. You've walked through the fire they sent to destroy you, and found warmth instead. And somewhere deep inside, you realize the ultimate reversal. You are no longer a victim of the dark. You are its reflection, calm, precise, and aware. You mirror their tactics not to become them, but to transcend them. You've learned how to see without being seen, how to move without leaving a trace. Power, you realize, was never loud. It was never in control. It was in composure. You don't destroy darkness, you define it. And when you finally turn to face it, the dark doesn't attack you anymore. It bows. You stand in a room that feels both ancient and new, surrounded by the faint hum of something shifting, something that has always been there but only now reveals itself. The light doesn't pour in gently, it cuts, sharp and deliberate, exposing corners that once whispered comfort. You see the cracks in everything, the lies dressed as guidance, the affection that was really control, the applause that was really a leash. For years, you mistook obedience for peace. You thought silence meant safety, but silence was their spell, and you were the altar they built upon. Now the ritual begins. You don't light the candle to see, you light it to confront. Every flicker burns through a memory. The people who taught you to shrink, the systems that told you to trust without question, the voice that told you you're too much when you started thinking for yourself. Each flame reveals their fingerprints, not just on your choices, but on your thoughts. They planted fear like seeds in your mind, and you watered them with guilt. But tonight, the roots burn. Because awareness, once awakened, spreads like fire, devouring everything that depended on your blindness. You realize they never feared truth itself. They feared your ability to hold it, because truth in untrained hands is chaos, but in yours it's power. You don't scream, you don't run. You stand there, watching every mask melt, authority dissolves, pedestals crack, the faces that once looked down on you now avert their eyes. You see the panic, their desperate attempt to blow out your flame with noise, with flattery, with doubt. But your calm terrifies them more than your rage. You understand now. The ones who built the dark never expected someone to navigate it without losing themselves. Then comes the revelation that breaks you open and rebuilds you in the same breath. The enemy you've been fighting wasn't only out there. It was the part of you that agreed to stay blind. The part that found comfort in being controlled because it meant you never had to face the weight of choice. You see your reflection in the dark, half light, half shadow, and realize both have always belonged to you. The Watchers weren't external gods. They were fragments of your fear, guarding the gate to your own strength. You bow your head not in submission, but in recognition. Illumination isn't conquest, it's communion. The room grows brighter, but you don't flinch. The walls that once enclosed you now reveal patterns. Ancient, deliberate, mathematical. Everything connects. Every betrayal was instruction. Every silence was training. You weren't being punished. You were being prepared. And as you breathe in the light, it doesn't blind you. It obeys you. The dark doesn't vanish, it kneels. You understand now why they trembled. Not because you became something new, but because you remembered what you were. The ritual was never about lighting the candle. It was about realizing the fire was always yours. You stand in the quiet aftermath, surrounded by the echoes of everything that once defined you. The lies have burned to ash, and the smoke still curls around your thoughts. For a moment, the silence feels unbearable. You used to mistake it for emptiness, but now you know. This is what truth sounds like when it finally breathes. You've seen what happens when the lights go out, when people shrink into shadows and call it safety. But now you're beginning to understand something terrifying. You were never meant to live in their blindness. You were meant to see. You start rebuilding, not with stone or certainty, but with awareness, a rarer kind of material. You no longer need their approval to exist. Every scar becomes a line in your architecture. Every betrayal becomes a lesson in alignment. You've stopped craving light from others. You've become your own source, the kind that doesn't blind, but reveals, the kind that doesn't beg to be seen, but forces the world to confront what it's ignored. You've learned that power isn't noise, it's precision. It's the silence that follows when every mask in the room knows you can see through it. You remember the days when you begged for peace, thinking it was the same as freedom. You see now that peace without clarity is just anesthesia. They wanted you calm because clarity terrifies. They wanted you humble because truth spoken from a clear mind sounds like rebellion. And so you rise not loud, but deliberate, a figure rebuilding their own temple in a world that worships illusion. You no longer pray for light. You craft it, brick by brick. Using the darkness that once tried to consume you, you forge something incorruptible, not hope, but sovereignty. The people around you sense it before they understand it. Their smiles falter, their laughter thins. They can't explain why your silence feels heavier than their words. It's because you've crossed a line they don't even see. You carry an aura that doesn't beg to belong, it measures. You've learned that mercy and distance are the same tool, just used differently depending on who stands before you. You no longer need to destroy to win. You simply let truth do the work. Every choice you make now cuts cleaner, faster, deeper, not out of cruelty, but calibration. And when you finally lift your eyes, the world looks different. The chaos no longer tempts you, and the calm no longer sedates you. You stand at the intersection of what you were and what you chose to become. The light around you isn't blinding, it's surgical. It doesn't spread wildly. It illuminates only what deserves to be seen. You realize the power isn't in turning on the light. It's in knowing when not to. The dark once used to define you, now it serves you. You are no longer the seeker, nor the victim of illumination. You are its keeper. The quiet hum of understanding returns, and for the first time you don't flinch at it. Because this time the silence isn't hollow, it's yours. They used to laugh at you for seeing too much, for asking questions that made rooms fall silent, for noticing the tremor behind someone's smile, the calculation in their kindness. You were the quiet one, the observer, dismissed as fragile because you never raised your voice. But silence was never weakness. It was your weapon sharpening in the dark. You learned how the world truly works, how people hide behind masks, how control hides behind comfort, and how truth suffocates beneath performance. And while they blinded themselves with noise, you waited, not to be seen, but to see. Now, the air feels different when you walk into a room. The same people who once overlooked you now lower their eyes. They can sense it, that something in you has changed. You no longer absorb their chaos. You reflect it back effortlessly. Every word they speak bends around your calm. Every attempt to test your silence collapses under your gaze. You've become the mirror they spent years avoiding. You no longer speak to convince. You let the truth inside you rearrange the air itself. And they feel it, the unsettling awareness that they no longer control the temperature of the room. You do. Once they fed on your uncertainty. They mistook empathy for permission. But you've stopped feeding them. The energy they used to steal now burns within you. Contained, disciplined, dangerous. You've learned what power really is, not domination, but direction. You no longer chase light. You generate it, cold, deliberate, and precise. They can't name what's changed, but they feel it. You've stepped outside their narrative, and the script they wrote for you has turned to ash in your silence. You've become something they can't predict, the variable they can't calculate. At first, they tried to pull you back. They used nostalgia, guilt, shared memories as bait. They said you were changing too fast, forgetting who you were. But that's the lie. You were never becoming someone new. You were only removing what they placed on top of you. The old you wasn't real. It was a costume stitched from expectations. And when you finally tore it off, the room filled with light, raw, unfiltered, almost violent in its purity. For the first time, they saw what hid beneath your quiet, the architect of your own mind. They whisper now, behind closed doors. They tell each other you've become cold, detached, dangerous. They're right, but not in the way they think. You didn't turn into something dark. You simply stopped pretending the darkness wasn't already there. You learned to see without fear, to cut through illusion without apology. You've become the one thing their world can't survive: clarity. And as you stand there, steady, unreadable, illuminated from within, they finally understand. They never feared the dark. They feared you turning the light on. Because now they can't hide. The masks melt. The performances crumble. And in that unbearable brightness, every lie burns away. You don't speak. You don't need to. The truth has taken your voice and made it eternal.